What's up, everybody? This is episode 51 of An Untold Narrative. In this episode, we feature an Duskus, who I believe is pronounced correctly. And I actually have never met Anne before. We have interacted a ton on Instagram, but we also have a large amount of mutual friends in the industry and colleagues and peers as well. So we've been chatting recently and trying to schedule this for the past month and a half. And I think it's a great opportunity to allow Anne to share her story, as I definitely think she is underrated in this industry and as a creative, as a maker, and any other facet of footwear designer that you can think of. An Untold Narrative is a podcast that features unknown creatives who do not have a blue check mark, who do not have tens of thousands of followers, but are grinding on the ground floor of different industries, anything creative from art to photography to footwear to design in general. And this is our platform of hosting them. So with that being said, episode 51 is going to feature Anne Duskus, and hope you enjoy. Welcome, Anne. We appreciate having you on An Untold Narrative. This is going to be episode 51. What is your 30-second elevator pitch about yourself? Because I tried to do a little bit of homework, and there's a number of bullet points associated to your name. As like-minded, kind of similar to myself, it's hard to classify as one thing. So what would you kind of scope yourself out as?
I would scope myself out as fashion designer turned footwear designer turned general creator. I just like to make stuff. And also I love to meet people and network and make new friends. So that's kind of like me and who I am as a person and as a brand.
Super cool. So you are self-employed, is my understanding. You run your own studio. Do you want to talk about that a little bit and kind of what you do from a holistic approach?
Yeah. So I've been doing my own thing pretty much since the pandemic started in March 2020. That's when I walked away from my last full-time design gig. And honestly, like it was not planned at all. It was sort of what I'm doing now was the result of the pandemic. And I always talk about how, sometimes I feel really like bad that I feel this way because I feel like, there has been so much grief because of the pandemic. However, like for me, I feel like I sort of have been able to find the silver lining and take advantage of that silver lining to sort of now being able to do my own thing. So essentially, in the beginning of the pandemic, when I walked away from my full-time job, I really found the time, all of a sudden have all this extra time back to actually get back into doing the things I love to do, which is to like create and working with my hands. And then sort of from there, I just started sharing more of my work publicly on social media. And that's sort of how it sort of like stemmed into, oh, maybe there is an opportunity for me to get into doing my own thing. And so, and the nature of what I do is a lot of like shoemaking and handcrafting, and a lot of what I do isn't really traditional like shoemaking techniques. Is sort of like, oh, I learned this, I can apply this into this, and I sort of just like mashed random things together to make it work for myself. And in sharing that information publicly, I've had more and more people reaching out to me wanting to, learn the stuff I've developed on my own. And so from there, I saw the opportunity to create master classes. Again, from the pandemic, I feel like more and more people are more open to the idea of learning something online. And so I started teaching and sharing my skill set and the knowledge that I've gained with my students online during the pandemic. And then, at the same time, I was taking on private clients who are ordering bespoke sneakers from me. And so, and then, so, so as that transitioned into the new year of 2021, I sort of found myself in this place where now, after teaching classes online, and people are now curious about whether or not I would start hosting classes in person. And because I was working from my home, I couldn't really entertain the idea of hosting somebody in my home. And so, so I just kind of, again, one thing led to the next. And I felt like, oh, well, now I actually can maybe think about getting a space where, I can host students in person. I can have my clients come meet with me in person so they can be included in, their bespoke, custom order experience. And so sort of from there, I just kept on continuing and developing sort of my curriculum and my business and working, one-on-one with clients. And that's kind of where I am today.
And so you mentioned offline that you're based in San Francisco, which probably isn't known for footwear design or footwear making or anything of that nature. It's very obviously tech oriented. Are you finding that there is a consumer base for handcrafts and, footwear design in San Fran, or is that like something that you're branching out and reaching other people from different cities?
Most definitely. Most of my clients find me on IG. And so, and they're not based here. I have one client that I'm working with right now who happens to be in the Bay Area, which has been super awesome because, again, having a space allows me to invite them into the studio so they can experience the design process as well. But most of my clients aren't based in the Bay Area. And so it's a lot of communication by phone, by Zoom. But I find that, again, I'm super grateful about this. I feel like the people who are coming to me already have a sense of a really solid understanding of what I do. And so in a sense, like the communication is almost like very minimum because they're like, okay, like I'm just gonna let Anne do her thing. And so that has just been like very delightful.
Super cool. No, I like that. And it sounds like you figured out how to manage the work and the scope and education from afar, which obviously a lot of people had to learn how to do, but it sounds like you hit the ground running as soon as the pandemic, and then you figured things out along the way. Talk about like kind of a little bit about, we'll backtrack of where you come from, how you found yourself, and you said fashion design first. Were you always creative? Were you always making things as a child? And then kind of how you stumbled into that career.
Yeah. So I definitely was one of those kids that knew like what I wanted to be when I grow up, because especially like, anything that's, I guess, like art related, or anything that we would consider creative, that was sort of frowned upon in my culture, and my upbringing, like in a Chinese culture. And so the expectation is that, yes, like the stereotype, even to this day, is like, oh, you should be a doctor, you should be a lawyer, or you should be an engineer, or something like that. And so, but I just always remember, I always loved arts and crafts. I always loved working with my hands. And I remember I was obsessed with Barbies, which is like, so I don't know, it's so silly. You're like, yes, I was a little girl who was obsessed with Barbies. And I remember, my aunt had a toy store and she would always bring me like new clothes for my Barbies. So she totally promoted my obsession with Barbies. And then, but that was it. It wasn't even like, oh, I want to make something special for my Barbies, like it was just like, oh, I get to change their clothes and play with them. And then, and then again, because I was never really encouraged to go into art or consider art as a career, I never considered pursuing art as a career. And so when I was going to college initially, I actually opted for graphic design because at the time in tech, that was like the hot thing, that was like somewhat related to tech and art.
Oh,
And so my mother at the time, you know, she was somewhat okay with me pursuing that because it was like somewhat tech related. And of course, like I wasn't passionate about it. I was really doing it to please her. So I can still do some kind of art without, you know, going into something that's more academically driven. And so, yeah, so from there I was just like super discouraged. Like I wasn't really happy with what I was doing. And then I took some time off and I went to spend time with my parents in the summer. And to my surprise, they actually ended up being the one encouraging me to get into fashion design. And so a little background story is my family business is an apparel manufacturing. And so it's not like a big drop off, you know, from like what they're already doing and how they can sort of like incorporate me into their business, you know, by maybe adding a designer in the family. And so they knew, I think they had good faith that yes, like I am passionate about art. I am somewhat decent at art. Maybe that's something that I can pursue. And so they encouraged me to get into fashion. And so that was really the first time in my early 20s where I was like, oh, like that's okay. All right. You know, so then I looked into it and I immediately started fashion school then. And then so I got my fashion design degree and I started my career designing apparel. And that's what I did for pretty much the first 6-7 years of my design career.
and you were doing that for your family business, or were you actually working for a fashion design house?
Yeah, no, I was actually working for like corporate companies. So my first job out of college, I was designing youth products for Gymboree. And then after that, so these are all Bay Area companies. I never left the Bay Area because this is just where I call home. And
Sure.
so I went to design for Gymboree. And then after that, I went to design for Levi's, who are also based in San Francisco. And then after that, I went to design for this Western equestrian company called Ariat, also based in the Bay Area. And it's from there where I started my footwear design career.
And how many, so you did clothing or apparel design for how long? And then before you jumped into footwear?
I think I did it about 6 years. 6 years.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you found an easy transition, because recently we also had a guest who came from fashion into footwear as well. And do you find that it was an easy transition? Because like, you know, you still have to design creatively, you still have to build out like a tech pack to communicate your ideas, right? So on a basic structural level, it's not too dissimilar, but in terms of like the design output and how many different layers or whatever it is different. It's a different product. So did you find that it was an easy transition or a difficult transition?
I wouldn't say it's a difficult transition, but I wouldn't call it easy either because it's just different, you know.
Right.
And so it's just learning how to create with different ways of working. And so what I found was very, very interesting when I first switched from being an apparel designer to a footwear designer is that as an apparel designer, and this was when I was at Ariat, so I designed apparel for Ariat before I went into designing footwear for Ariat. And so this was at Ariat, this was at Levi's, this was at Gymboree. When I design apparel for companies, typically most fashion designers will also handle a pretty big percentage of the product development process.
Sure.
And so when I was designing apparel, I was also, you know, working in PLM, and really like the time that we spent designing, and this goes with like apparel and footwear all together, is probably only like 10% of the time that we spend designing. The rest of the time we're like project managing, right?
Sure.
And so when I switched over to footwear, I remember the first time I did this. Like I basically like, oh, I designed, I made this pretty picture, and then, oh wait, you're telling me I don't have to go like upload this in PLM? Like I can just hand my design off to my product developer and they'll do it, you know? And so that was like a really big difference, like right off the bat.
Did you
Like
did
there's
you
this,
feel like you wanted to do both sides of that, or did you feel like you should be part of both sides of that, or were you stoked that you didn't have to do anything else?
I, because I was trained, I was used to doing both. That I felt that it was strange that I wasn't doing both and I was only doing design. And I think, looking back now, um, and this is what I always tell, my students who come to take a class with me, is that I always believe that knowing how to knowing how something is produced, like if I'm the designer and I know how something is produced, not just from like the knowledge level, but from like a handcrafting level, it makes you a better designer. And so when I made the transition from designing apparel to designing footwear, it wasn't like I had like a footwear design 101, it was just like you learn everything on the job, right? And so like I didn't know like what a shank was, I didn't know what a heel count, like all these like inside component of a shoe, like I'm just sitting there like just like pretending that I know when I didn't know. And you just kind of have to like, ask questions at the time when it's appropriate to ask questions, or like do your own homework, right? And so like had I been put in a position as an assistant designer at the time where I'm they're making me design and learn all the components at the same time, I think that would have made me a better designer. That would have helped me build a stronger foundation, because that's what I had to learn like in fashion school before I started my fashion design career.
Yeah. How long, what was like the footwear design kind of your career there? Like how you obviously started at Area, and for those that don't know, you said it's an equestrian brand. They also do like Western work, and they're pretty, it's a pretty large brand, right? So while in the Bay Area, they are well known in my world as well, right? Like for work industrial, for, boots and stuff like that. And also like cowboy boots as well. So they
Yep.
do a little bit of everything, but like how long, you said you started as an assistant designer, then I'm assuming you climbed some sort of corporate ladder. Talk about kind of your career within footwear.
Yeah. So at the time when I had the opportunity to make a transition over from apparel to footwear, I actually almost didn't go into footwear, because if I stayed in apparel design, literally like next month I was going to get promoted to senior designer. Like I was on a trajectory to become like a more senior designer. And when the opportunity was offered to me, I literally would have to start from the bottom again, right? And reclimb that ladder again. And I just remember at the time I was so conflicted, because you understand this, like being in a senior design position, obviously, like, it's the title, it's the salary, all that good stuff. And starting from the bottom means like a pay cut from my current role, and all that, right? And so I really struggled with it, because it was, the money obviously was very enticing if I stayed in my current role. But I'm also one of those people where I get bored really easily. And so like I'm always looking for new challenges. And so when I finally decide to take it, again, like I feel so blessed to be in a position where I can, take two steps back from my current like career trajectory in order to like, maybe like move forward. And so, and so, so I basically started from the bottom again. Um, and, um, and again, like, it wasn't like there isn't many people that I know that actually went to footwear design school. Most people who design footwear today are industrial designers, and they have an industrial design degree.
Yeah.
And so even then, like there really isn't a place where we all like go and learn about like footwear components and how to build a shoe, right? And so I think, for me, it was just like, oh, I get to be a sponge all over again. I get to learn everything from scratch again. And lucky for me, I had a good mentor at the time. That was my boss, and like he really took me under his wing, and he introduced me to all the people all over the world, in our factories, in our tanneries, and And it was really strange because I think it took no time at all. Once I started my road, my path, into footwear design, where I finally felt like I found my place in design. I didn't really feel that in apparel design because it's like, okay, I know how to do this job. I can do it well. Like, cool. But it wasn't until I discovered footwear that's when I was like, okay, I think this is it.
Super cool. And then, so how long did you stay at Ariat designing shoes?
I was there. I designed shoes for them for just over 4 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you now have a collective, let's call it decade, under your belt of design and products, let's call it, and
Yeah.
apparel and footwear. What did you decide to transition to next? I mean, because I think we're similar in the sense of constantly wanting to learn something new, a new skill set, and you get bored easy, and you got to keep moving and things like that. Was 4 years enough for you, or did you go to another footwear job and do something bigger or better, or what was kind of the next milestone for you?
So, so I think Ariat was such like a great place for me to cut my teeth because there I designed pretty much products in all categories, right? From men, women, and youth, and from like functional Western like boots to like fashion Western boots, to lifestyle shoes, So like it's like a whole gamut, I got a little taste of everything, and it was when I was at Ariat that I sort of got an itch, to again going back to that like conversation about like knowing how to make a pair of shoes physically with your hands make you a better designer. And so it was when I was at Ariat where I had a personal desire. Now this wasn't like required by my job, but I just had a personal desire of wanting to learn how to make a pair of shoes. And then so that's when I signed up for a shoe surgeon class. So I actually took my first like physical shoemaking class from Dominic, the shoe surgeon, down in LA.
What
And
year was
then
this?
this was 2018 in October. So it's been 3 years.
Okay, so that's so funny. I took the shoe surgeon course in, I think it was March of 2018. I think I was like,
No way.
yeah, it was like one of his third or fourth class that he ever did, I think, like in LA.
Were you SL3?
I think so. It might have been.
That's amazing. I was SL5.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah. So, and then from there, I was like, it reminded me how much I enjoy working with my hands because prior to that, I sort of just put everything like on the back burner, right? It's like, yeah, I always like did a lot of arts and crafts growing up, but like now I work a full-time job. I don't have time for this. And then so I sort of like rediscovered how much I enjoy working with my hands. And then so from there, like I sort of like came home and continue like just creating on my own, like after work or on the weekends. And then, and I think it was like 2019 in the fall, where an opportunity came up where Dominic was looking for somebody on this design team. So I actually, and I was kind of feeling like, okay, like I was like comfortable with my job, I was like feeling complacent and which is like so funny because I remember like having a conversation with my mother and I was like, Mom, like I think I'm gonna quit Ariat. I'm gonna go like, find a new job and go work for someone else. And then immediately she was like, well, like Ariat is such a good company, it's such a stable job, you have a stable income, you have benefits, all the good stuff that you would want from a company. Why would you walk away from that? And I was like, yeah, Mom, but like I'm not being challenged, like I feel like I need a new challenge in my life. And then I was like, like I'm gonna become like dumber if I don't continue to challenge myself, and so she's like, well, okay, well, you know what you're doing, so like whatever, do your thing. But and so I actually went to work with Dominic in LA, and then like shortly after that, it was like 4 months into it, like pandemic happened. And then and so like that's when I was like, okay, well maybe I need to, like, now's not a good time. So then I moved back home, and then that's when I was like, okay, maybe I'll do my own thing for a little bit.
Sure. What was we'll go backtracking a little bit to the first time you took Dom's class. What was like the biggest takeaway for you? And obviously you had an emotional connection to getting back to working with your hands and creating something from scratch. They definitely teach you that. I always recommend people to do it, right? Like it's worth the money in my opinion. But like, what was like one other thing that like you really took away from that course?
People.
Yeah.
It's all about the people. Honestly, like to this day, some of the best friends I have today are from that class.
Isn't it
And
crazy?
yeah, and I'm not even saying like from the class student wise, like I'm really good friends with all the teachers, and I'm collaborating today, you know, with all the teachers that I met who are now my friends and who are now my personal friends. And just that network of people that I got to meet through the class, I think it's so much bigger than the product itself. Like, yeah, you learn some shoemaking skills. Yeah, you walked away with a cool pair of shoes, but like to me, that's nothing in comparison to the people I got to become friends with.
Yeah, no, I would completely agree. And a lot of the people that I took the course with as well in 2018 are still either I've worked with since then on a footwear industry level, or they're just friends that we're sending each other DMs every week, or you know, or I got to see a couple weeks ago when I was in LA myself. So yeah, you're 100% right. It's always, you know, people over product in my opinion, and you know,
Mm-hmm.
those relationships go so far, and it seems like everybody that walks through that class does something pretty great with their life.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, especially it's like the people who are choosing to do something with it, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that gets us full circle from kind of how we started the conversation of now, you know, you started the pandemic doing your own studio and working for yourself. And I definitely want to spend some time talking about working for yourself, because I think we are moving towards an individualized society. Like my closest friends probably have heard me say that a million times over the past 6 months, because it's like I'm just a firm believer in it, right? Like I think creatives are looking for, to your point, learning something new, constantly elevating, constantly trying new things, constantly working with new people. What are some of the things or challenges or hurdles that you've experienced over the past now 2 years, right? You're almost at a year and a half plus of working for yourself, doing your own studio thing. Obviously you had no idea what you were doing when you started, and now it seems like you have it figured out, or at least based on the organization behind you if you're watching on YouTube, the organization of boxes and things like that behind you, it looks like you have your things, your shit figured out. So what are some of the things that you've learned along your journey in the past year and a half?
Oh man, I feel like there's so much to unpack, but like on the spot, it's like, what are some of the things that um, I might have to like get
do
back
you
into that, but I think, yeah, go ahead.
do you in the past year and a half, do you regret at all doing what you've done, or do you kind of think about stability every once in a while, or are you like, no, I'm constantly pushing myself, I'm trying to figure things out for myself and for my future? Kind of what's your positioning now after doing it for quite a bit of time?
Yeah. So I will get it on record again. Like, I don't think I could do this. I would be able to do this today without my husband's support. So, you know, my husband has a really great job and he has a really great income. And not that I'm dependent on that, because he will be the first one to tell you, he's like, Anna is Miss Independent Woman. Like she refuses to take like charity from anyone, even from her own husband, you know? And that's what like the values my mom has always taught me, you know, for better or for worse. Like, don't ever depend on a man, you know, in case you walk away. You know, which is like so funny, but it's true, you know. And so I think, yes, like financially it's always the big thing. It's like, okay, like it's not, if I don't work then I don't eat, you know. I don't have a constant flow stream of like paycheck that's coming into my bank account every month. And so I, like, a majority of my time is really spent strategizing. It's like, okay, like I need to pay for rent next month, like for my studio, like how do I pay for that? And yes, like the reality is like the worst case scenario, like I can always lean on my husband, you know, he's very supportive, which is like so amazing. And so I think that takes a lot of pressure off in terms of like the financial stability, you know, and how serious that needs to be in order for me to continue pursuing, you know, what I'm doing today. And so I think that was like a potential struggle, you know. It's like, how do I pay for rent every month? But then, you know, with that taken away, I honestly don't, I feel like I'm in such a good position where I don't have any like struggles that will break me, but more like struggles of like, how do I get to everything on my plate work wise, you know, like between, so I'm not just working with my clients, you know, that's not my only stream of income. And I'm also thinking about like, okay, like I'm planning on, like, you heard it here first, like I'm planning on launching a collection, you know, like in January, hopefully, you know, in
Like
the
a
New
footwear
Year's.
collection?
Not original designs though, not yet. But you know,
Okay.
just like I'm always thinking about ways of like, how do I supplement my income,
Sure.
right? Because I know for a fact, and you know, I will like break this to everybody who's trying to make customizing their full-time gig. It's not realistic, you know, like, and also like I'm a hustler, but I am not in the sense that like I'm very picky with who I work with. And again, what a privilege to be able to be picky with who I want to work with.
No, but
Um,
like I get it, right? Like, and everybody says that, but like that's what you've worked so hard over the past 10, 12 years for, right? To be selective. That's the place that everybody's striving to get to. And so it's not like it just was like handed to you. It was like, no, I've worked my ass off to get there. And now I can finally take a step back and be super selective and take the projects that I want to take. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think so many people in creatives that I speak to is like, there's like this imposter syndrome around that of like, do I just like, should I be in this place? Or like, you know, is that such like an overprivileged thing to say? And it's like, but everybody needs to like take the macro level view and realize like, no, I've worked really hard to get here. And that's why I'm part of a 1% of a 1%, not because something was handed to me. So I apologize. I'm just going to interject because I'm sure that you've worked really hard to get there. So
Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate that. Yeah, but I mean, again, so it's like I'm constantly, I think the struggle is always like constantly thinking about like, okay, how do I supplement my income? And so it's always, so I can't just fully focus on what's on my plate right now. I'm always thinking about like, okay, like 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road, and like really planning out like what my business look like in a year, right?
so I want to interject there because
Yeah, please.
I've asked this question to a number of people over the 50 now plus episodes of this podcast. It sounds like I know the answer to this question, but do you have like a 1, 2, 5, 10-year plan for yourself or even like your business? Like, do you forecast that far in advance, or like, how do you break it down yourself?
I do not, and I should. I think the furthest I plan out is maybe just over a year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm. I don't. It's hard for me to think about like my business like 3 to 5 years from now, because I feel like, if I'm being completely honest with you right now, I feel like up until this point, I'm just kind of like making it work, you know. And so like, and then lucky for me, so far it's working okay, so it's like, you know, like knock on wood. But I think based on my current like responsibilities and what's currently on my plate, I am thinking a year down the road, because that's just the nature of what I'm doing right now.
Even that's incredible, right? Like, because it seems like this day and age, like the world's moving so fast that like if you do plan more than a year, it's probably not going to be a good plan because things are going to change so much by then anyway.
Yeah, and that's sort of the expectation, you know. It's like I know and accept that things will change, and sort of already making plans, preparing myself to adapt to those changes when they come. But in generally generally speaking, this is the path I'm going down, and we'll see like what comes my way, sort of thing. But real quick, I want to share with you. So I really believe in like goal setting and like manifestation. And like, I think there's this kind of like misconception of like, oh, I'm just going to say it out loud and put it out there so the universe can provide, you know, like I believe it, but then I also believe that no, you have to work for it. Like you don't just put it out there and universe will provide. Like you got to work hard for it. And so I remember like recently, so we have, my husband and I made this vision board together as a family. This was maybe like 3 years ago. And we had put down like, okay, we want to achieve these things like in the next year. So like these are our 1 year goal. And like, of course, like we didn't look at it for a while, you know, we're just like, okay, like it's on the board, we're gonna do this. We made all these like pretty pictures of like what we're gonna achieve. And then I was like organizing my house the other day, and then I flipped it back, you know, where the vision board is, because I was using the other side for something else. And I looked at all the post-it like that we wanted to do, you know, we're like, oh, check, 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 hit that, and like literally we did all of it, right? And I was like, holy moly, you know. So that was just like such a proud moment for me, you know, because I was like, okay, we actually did all these things, you know. So but then again, it's like, had I not physically written it down and put it out there so my mind can start working towards it, like those things would have never happened, you know.
I love that. I appreciate you sharing that, right? Like I think that's so cool. Like and whatever people's methodology is, right? Like vision board's a great idea, and people should have like, what do you want to accomplish in life? Like you can't just get there by like sitting on your ass all day. Like you got to do it. I do it on a week by week basis, like in my journal, right? So like there are certain things, and they're always like, it's like 15 to 20 things, and I never get to 15 to 20 things, but it's a stretch goal. It's like, if I could do all these things, then my brain starts working on it all, and they just like click together over time. And eventually you do get to everything. But that's awesome that you like randomly stumbled into it and flipped it over, and then it was like, oh yeah, we did all that.
Yeah, it was just like so rewarding, you know. It's just like, oh, we want to save this much money, we did that. We want to travel to this place, we did that. I want to get my yoga teacher training done, I did that, you know. So it's just like all of this stuff, which is like, they're big goals, you know. And like the fact that we were able to achieve them was like such a good feeling.
So I talk to a lot of people who also like, they say a lot of things. They have all these big ambitions. They talk about doing all I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this. And then they never do it. They say a lot of things. They never do anything. What do you think separates yourself and your husband, it sounds like as well, to put things into action? Like, how do you stay motivated? Like what drives you maybe like to try to help somebody who is somebody who tries to say it out into the universe, but then nothing really clicks because they can't get themselves to do it as much as possible, or whatever the case may be. But it sounds like you're a doer versus a sayer. And you know, that to your point, it's like you have to put in the work regardless of what it is, from an artistic creation or just like a goal setting thing. So like, what do you think helps drive you to do those things?
I think for me, it's always about like personal growth. And again, this goes back to like that conversation I had with my mom. It's like, Mom, I'm looking for a new job. But she's like, why? Everything is so good right now. You know, and like, why are you going to like F it up? And I think I've never been someone who like can be one thing for a long time. And so, and I guess like I think it's more of a personal growth thing. And to your point, you know, I think it's the exact reason of, I don't want to be that person that always talks about who I want to be, or if only this, if only that. You know, I think that's probably like one of my biggest pet peeves, is like being that person. And like, no offense to anybody who's listening, but like being that, I don't want to be that person who sits and just talk about all the great things that they want and they can achieve if they just did it, you know? And so, and I think part of that really comes from like my parents, you know, who are business owners, honestly.
I was about to say that for you. I was like, I'm pretty positive it totally comes from like a parent thing. So I can 1000% relate, because I'm an immigrant from Poland, and like, to me, in my brain, what drives me to do a million things is like, if I don't work and do and achieve all these things to make like our last name worth something in this country, like then I feel like I have this, it's a totally like internal and self-made up of like I've failed what their mission was here. Like they came here for a better life and they came for all these things, and like that's what drives me, that's what motivates me to do all these things. And I was like, I'm pretty positive she's got something similar in her.
Yeah, honestly, like my parents for sure. Like growing up, I've always watched my parents like work so hard in their business, you know, and then it's because of that I have a very privileged life growing up. But then, you know, like, but then I don't ever want people to mistake like or misunderstand like what I have today does not like my parents helped shape me to who I am today, and they provided to me financially growing up, you know. But as soon as I started working, you know, which was like in my late teens, like my parents like stopped supporting me, you know, not that they would, but I was like, no, like I'm good, you know, like, you know. And so it's like people are always like, well, you know, like why don't you ask your parents for help? I'm like, no, that's not my money, like, you know, like that's their money, like, you know. And so I think that's part of like what drives me too. It's like this this desire to, and I can't even say that like with that, like with a straight face. It's like this desire to want to be self-made, because I am not self-made. I am a product of my parents, you know, like I have what I have today because they provided and they paved the way. And so I think part of that maybe comes from like, you know, one, like I don't want to disappoint my parents. I want to make them proud, you know, because they set me up for success. And then two is just like, and I feel like every time I talk about this, it's like, oh, there goes Anne again. She has a chip on her shoulders, you know? And it's like, I am an immigrant. I'm a minority. I am a woman. And so like in design, you know, whether or not it's fashion or it's in footwear, you know, it's just I honestly have experienced that I have to work harder, you know, in comparison to my like male counterpart in order for me to be recognized as somebody who actually has something to say. And so and so I always, again, like my husband probably hates me for this, you know. I mean, he doesn't, like he supports me, but it's just I always say that like everything, I'm always that person that's like, okay, everything a man can do, I can do better. And I think that's what drives me as well, you know, to like I don't ever want somebody to say like I can't do something as well because I am me, you know. And so I think that's why I'm always like, okay, self-growth, personal growth, professionally and like personally is so important.
That's awesome. No, and I agree, right? Like with all of that being said, and that's awesome. And don't ever think like, you know, I know you mentioned a comment of like, oh, I don't want to like talk about maybe the listeners, but you know, I get messages about people who listen to this podcast, and it is a tool for motivation. So even if somebody is listening who is one of those people who maybe talks more than they put into action, but you never know if it could be listening to you that changes that mentality. So all that context, everything that was just said is super true and definitely really helpful. In regards to the future though, you mentioned something coming out in January, but like what can people look forward to seeing from you over, you know, the next, let's call it 3 to 6 months, you know, anything exciting for people to follow along with your journey?
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like you and I can probably take this offline and talk about so much about it, but without getting into too much because it's a lot to unpack. I am currently working on, so this is like sneaker related, not related, but more like technology related.
Sure.
I'm working on this startup with like 5 really good friends of mine. It's NFT related. Um, and um, and so it's super exciting because like you hear it here first, you heard it here first. The role that I'm playing on the startup is I get to be Captain America, essentially. I get to assemble the Avengers, you know, and these Avengers being like really awesome artists who we would want to showcase, um, and and so that's sort of coming down the pipeline. That's what I'm really like busy working on these days, is to just like building that out with my friends. And then also, you know, continuing to work with my clients on the side, and then hopefully launching, you know, a really small capsule collection that's actually based around, I'm just going to share it with you, like the Air Force One silhouette. So it's non-original design, but I feel like there's a missing link in the market of what I'm doing, and hopefully that will fill the gap. But you know, I'm getting people, again, like people are so nice. You know, this is where I'm like, imposter syndrome. You know, people are like, and like, you know, like we love to see original designs from you. And I love to do that, although I'm not quite sure if I'm ready for that. And also I'm like, okay, you guys are so nice, but like how many people are actually going to buy like an Duskus design? Let's be real, you know, especially like having.
That's a huge point. It's like, you know, and I like, people don't know this. I don't even think I've ever said this out loud, but like I totally test like the market myself and like my followers and like the people who actually fuck with me all the time. Like, who's willing to spend? Is it $20? Is it $40? Is it $60? Like, what's that threshold? Because you're right, even your closest of close friends aren't always gonna support you. They want to encourage you, they want to say all this shit, but who's gonna do it?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, maybe not yet, you know, and especially if I'm the person that's going to be producing it, like I don't have the physical capacity to even do a small run of 10, you know, which is crazy. And like, again, like you understand, it's like, okay, even just doing 10, like I have to have full size run of last, you know, and I have to, you know, it's just a whole thing. And so, so I think I'm still a little bit far from that. That's definitely not within the next 3 to 6 months. But I mean, let's talk offline, Dave.
Okay.
let's get some Vibram souls in here, you know? I mean, yeah, just for fun, right? You know? Yeah.
All right, we may or may not cut that part out. Well, let me ask you a little bit different of a question, right?
Yeah.
Are you happy?
Oh, yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. 100% completely. Okay, this is why like you were in Portland last week. Like you were in California like last week, and I was like, come see us in San Francisco. Like, what's up? Like, you know, you're seeing all my homies, and I'm like, I'm feeling FOMO. And so, like, my studio mate and I were very selective as to who we welcome into our space. And the reason being is, like, this is our sanctuary. We're so happy here. We're so happy in the sense that, yes, this is our studio space. However, beyond that, again, going back to people, you know, like the people who work in this building are custom furniture designers, are custom jewelry designers, you know, and are custom micro beer, you know, designers, you know? And so, and it's like, I get to come here and work with these like super awesome people who are creative in their field by choice. Like, I'm not coming here to, like, I'm not going to my corporate job because I have to go to my corporate job because that's how I get paid. And the joke is like, oh, people are like, oh, like how often are you in the studio? I'm like, I'm here like at a minimum 6 days, but maximum 7 days a week. Like, I'm here every single day, but like, because I want to, like, not because I have to. But then part of me started to feel bad because I'm not spending as much time at home with my family, you know, but like, I'm like, in terms of just like what I do on the daily, like I'm so grateful, and it makes me really happy and that I get to do what I do. And that's the honest truth.
That's incredible to hear. It sounds like you've figured out a little bit of life, at least.
Oh my gosh. I don't know how I stumbled upon it, but hopefully it's, you know, it sticks around for a while. Yeah.
I have a couple more questions for you. One is, where can people find you, right? Do you have a website? What are your handles online? You know, where can people follow your journey?
Yeah, for sure. So my website is studioduskus.com, and my Instagram handle is @studioduskus. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much where I'm at.
Cool. Do you only use like Instagram and then your website for people to find you, or are you on other platforms as well?
yeah, so I'm only on those two platforms right now. And so my studio mate and I, we are actually, this is actually the next 3 to 6 months, next 3 months or so, less than that. We are launching a podcast together. So hopefully we'll be on platforms where you can find podcasts like Apple Music, Spotify, maybe Google Play. But we'll keep you guys posted.
Super cool. Well, definitely, I'll look forward to that. That'll be awesome.
Thanks.
And then the last question that I have for you is, out of everything that you've learned so far in your career and your life in general and everything that you've gone through, what would be one piece of advice that you would tell anybody or to help them regardless if they're creative or not?
Just be nice to people. Honestly, it's so basic, but it's like being nice to people sounds easy, but I guess it's harder for some people than it actually is. I honestly feel like be nice to people, and also like be humble, and be modest about who you are and what you do. I feel like by sticking to those two, like just life models in general for me, has got me everything I wanted today. And I think you can attest to this, Dave. It's like the industry that we're in is tiny. It's like, is this big. And like, for better or for worse, like everybody talks to everybody. And if you want to get hired for a job and be like, oh, like this person used to work here, my friend's friend, or, I know somebody who works here. And like, and so it's like, work hard, have a good ethic, have integrity, be nice to people, because you never know, like somebody that used to work below me, I might have to work for them in the future,
I love that you say that. I say that all the time. I'm like, I'm a true believer that it doesn't matter what your age is or where you come from. Anybody who slides in I'm like, I'm going to answer it, because like one day that person could just be my boss.
100%. 100%. Yeah. So like treat everybody like equally, and yeah, just be nice to people.
That's awesome. And thank you for joining us on episode 51 of An Untold Narrative. This was awesome. I really appreciate you spending the time with us.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor.